You wake up and the fire is almost dead. Outside, the ground is frozen, the wind is cutting through everything, and there is no warm house waiting for you. No heater, no supermarket, no weather forecast telling you when this ends. And somehow, you have to survive the entire winter. For ancient humans, winter was not a season you simply waited out. It changed almost every rule of survival. Plants disappeared, water froze, animals moved away or became harder to find or became harder to track through severe weather. And every night, the temperature dropped low enough that one bad decision could become your last. So how did humans survive winters cold enough to kill an unprotected person in hours? The first answer seems obvious: fire. But having fire and surviving winter with fire are two very different things. You cannot just press a button when the flames go out. Keeping a fire alive means constantly finding fuel, protecting it from wind and moisture, and making sure someone notices before the last glowing ember disappears. Because losing your fire at the wrong time could be a disaster. Fire gave you warmth, it gave you light, it helped cook food and offered protection around the campsite. Archaeological evidence shows that humans were using controlled hearths hundreds of thousands of years ago, long before modern humans spread across much of the planet. But fire alone was not enough. You still had to keep the heat close to your body, and that meant clothing. The earliest clothing did not look anything like what you wear today. There were no zippers, buttons, or perfectly fitted jackets. Animal hides could be scraped, prepared, wrapped, tied, and eventually shaped into better fitting covering. And that difference mattered more than it sounds. A loose hide can block some wind, but clothing fitted closely around your body traps warm air much more effectively. Over time, humans developed increasingly sophisticated tools for working hide. Later, bone needles allowed people to make carefully fitted clothing. Imagine what that meant. Instead of simply surviving beside a fire, you could carry part of your protection with you. You could move farther from camp. You could move through colder landscapes. You could survive in places where your body by itself was never designed to live. But what happened when the sun went down? That was where shelter became critical. Some ancient humans used caves and rock shelters when they were available. Others created simple shelters using materials from the landscape: wood, branches, hides, stone, and in some places, even large animal bones could become part of structures that reduced exposure to wind and cold. The goal was not to create a comfortable house. It was to create a small pocket of survivable air. A protected shelter combined with body, hide, and the nearby fire could make the difference between a freezing night and one you actually woke up from. And sometimes, the other people around you were part of the heating system. Sleeping close together reduced exposed surface area and helped conserve warmth. A group could also maintain a fire, gather fuel, hunt, prepare food, care for children, and watch for danger far more effectively than one person alone. Winter made cooperation incredibly valuable, but warmth was only half the problem. You still had to eat, and winter quietly made that much harder. Many edible plants became unavailable. Fruits vanished. Snow and frozen ground could hide useful roots. Animals migrated, changed behavior, or became difficult to track through severe weather. At the same time, your body needed energy to stay warm. So where did those calories come from? For many cold climate groups, animals became enormously important. Large animals could provide much more than meat. Fat offered dense energy. Hides could become covering. Sinew could be used for binding and sewing. Bones could become tools or useful structural material. Almost nothing valuable had to be wasted, and fat was especially important. Your body can survive on lean meat, but in extreme conditions, protein alone is not an ideal fuel supply. Fat contains far more energy per gram and could provide the concentrated calories needed during cold periods when food was difficult to obtain. But there was another problem. What if you couldn't hunt tomorrow? Ancient humans could not assume every day would provide food. Weather could trap, herds could move, a hunt could fail. Survival meant taking advantage of abundance when it appeared, and where possible, preserving food for later through techniques such as drying, smoking, freezing, or storing it in naturally cold conditions. Winter rewarded preparation, and the humans who lived in cold climates for generation after generation changed another way too. Their bodies adapted. Some ancient human populations, especially Neanderthals, had shorter, broader bodies than people adapted to warmer climates. A compact body loses heat more slowly because it has less surface area relative to its mass. Even their limbs tended to be shorter. You can think of it like this: a long, narrow object exposes more area to the cold. A compact shape holds heat more efficiently. Their bodies were not magically immune to winter. They were simply better shaped, but perhaps the most important adaptation was not fire, clothing, shelter, or even body shape. It was the ability to combine all of them. You knew where fuel could be found. You knew which animals might move through the landscape. You knew how to prepare hide, where to shelter from wind, when to move camp, and which resources had to be saved before conditions became worse. That knowledge had to survive long stronger than any individual person, so it was shared. A child growing up in one of these groups was not discovering winter survival from scratch. You learned by watching people who had already survived, and that may be the strangest part. When you imagine ancient humans surviving winter, you might picture them constantly freezing, starving, and barely making it through each night. Sometimes they probably were, but humans did something extraordinary. They turned environments their bodies were poorly suited for into places they could actually live, not with one brilliant invention, with hundreds of small solutions layered together. Fire protected the shelter, shelter protected the people, clothing protected them when they left, hunting provided food and material, cooperation kept everything working, and knowledge connected all of it. So, if you woke up on a frozen morning thousands of years ago, with the fire almost dead and winter waiting outside, you wouldn't survive because you were tougher than the cold. You would survive because generations before you had already learned how not to let that fire go out.